Okay, and welcome everybody to the second episode of that 401k virtual bunch. I made that joke the first time when Mike was the first guest, and Mike's here today again. That this would not be the first and only one. We would do a second one. So I want to introduce James Holland. James, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, good afternoon, everyone. I'm with MillenniuM Investment and Retirement Advisors. We're an RIA based in Charlotte, North Carolina, but don't let the accent fool you. Brooklyn born, Long Island raised. Our focus is solely in the qualified plan space. Known RE for, I don't know, probably longer than either one of us wants to admit at this point. But has been a tremendous resource for us and all the advisors we work with. So appreciate the opportunity to get together with everyone this afternoon.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of networking, but like the right form of networking. And I just remember when I started my practice, it's over 10 years now. And you reached out to me. I was writing articles. I was talking about, some of the same issues that you were talking about back in the day. And there was a guy on LinkedIn that
Elmer.
Yeah, well, his name's not
Elmer,
yeah,
right?
but yeah, there was a guy. So we were always on the LinkedIn messages back when people were actually in the LinkedIn groups, and he didn't like he thought we were selling fear because we were talking about, you should disclose all your fees, because James was one of the first guys that was doing that, fee disclosure before there was fee disclosure. And this guy was just saying, only the big plans get sued and you're selling fear and nobody cares about fees. And, it's just so funny to think about it. We all have our faults. And I think my biggest fault is I like to be right. I enjoy being right. And I'll admit when I'm wrong. Like I jokingly say, I don't jokingly say, when I heard that Apple was going to have its own stores, I thought it was a bad idea. What do you mean they're going to have their own stores? They're going to compete against every other computer, thing. So at least I admit that I was wrong. I was also wrong about Amazon selling anything other than CDs, DVDs, and books. I'm not afraid to admit it. But I like when I'm right. And when I was right we were right back then. It obviously doesn't pay our rent for being right. But no, the funny thing, I remember you calling me up that first time because I work from home, as we could say. And I remember talking on the phone, and it's so funny because, you're one of my best friends in the business, as I say. And, I think people don't realize, especially the new people, that when you contact somebody who's an ERISA attorney, or contact another plan provider, you don't have to tell them, who are you using as an advisor?
First initial P, Hibbard, Hibbard.
Oh, there we go.
So,
yeah, it's like old Mother Hubbard with an I, Hibbard at Columbia Benefits.
So, losing my train of thought, but it's funny when you get reached out to LinkedIn invitations and they just all of a sudden think that you're an ERISA attorney. You've never worked with another advisor ever. I just had, I don't want to say the company, but it was one of these salespeople for one of these insurance providers. And they email me and say, by the way, as an attorney, you can get like a percentage of our advisory fee. And to me, that's like the biggest no-no. If anybody ever knows me, when somebody says, by the way, I could split my advisory fee. I don't want my hand in your pocket. You shouldn't put, first of all, legally, you can't have your hand in my pocket as an attorney. But it's just funny that, networking takes time. Listen, you called me up, make sure I wasn't a maniac, Yeah, he writes great articles, but, but he's crazy, that sort of thing. I think that they don't realize that, stuff like takes time.
It does. Yeah. And the beauty behind it. And one of the things that, Ari is far too humble about is, again, the problem we ran into initially is when I introduced myself from MillenniuM Investment and Retirement Advisors, it probably did not ring a bell with a lot of people because we're a small RIA in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're not a big wirehouse. We're not one of the big consulting firms, but whenever we called Ari, the meter never started. We didn't have a 30-minute conversation. And then 15 minutes later, I didn't get an email saying, by the way, we talked for 30 minutes, so you owe me $97.50. So he has been a tremendous resource. He is far too altruistic. He probably should charge more than he does and should charge people more.
That's what my wife says, but listen.
But about 95% of our business comes from outside advisors. So literally almost all of it comes from other outside advisors. We act as a 316, 321, 338 or combination thereof for the advisors we work with. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten hey, James, thanks for giving me Ari's number because somebody got jammed up with the Quadro question or somebody got jammed up with something else and they called 4 other attorneys and it was a, X dollar retainer and X for every 15 minutes they talked on the phone when Ari said, shoot me an email or give me a call and they got the answer and it either won or saved the business. So
but I mean, you're no different when it comes to the retirement plan space. Again, you guys, you were doing 338 when nobody was doing 338. 10 years ago, that was like the newest thing. And when I first heard about 338, and I think it might've been from you, I thought, I think this is the greatest thing. And of course, people are like, oh, no, it's, naysayers. But on paper, it looked like the smartest thing to do. Over the 10 years that we've known each other, what are the biggest differences that you've seen in the business in terms of the advisors in the business, costs? I mean, revenue sharing became, went out with, it's kind of like something out of the disco era when we talk about revenue sharing.
I think you and I probably, if it wasn't 10 years ago, it was 9 years ago and 365 days, said 364 days said that wasn't going to last. It just, it didn't make sense from day one. And eventually people were going to figure it out. And it's the funny thing is you talk about revenue sharing and with a plan sponsor and they might not get it. We had a doctor group and there were 10 surgeons in the room and we told them 25 basis points and we got like 9 different answers. It's like, these are guys who you're putting your life in their hands who are probably very good at what they do, but they couldn't figure out what 25 basis points of $20 million was. Until, of course, you explained to them that they were subsidizing the 401k plan for everyone else because they had the bigger balances. Then all of a sudden the math became very easy for them to do. So, I mean, I think the biggest change is, and for the younger advisors that we work with, they understand the idea of collaboration makes sense. Not just this industry, but the advisory industry. Forget ERISA, the advisory industry 30 years ago was mine. No one wanted to share anything. I fought with my partner, Rick, here for 18 months saying, listen, we have to go to the outside advisors. These people are selling the plans. They'll give up a piece if it means they're going to be able to hold on to the plan longer and protect themselves. And literally for 1.5 years, he gave me pushback and finally acquiesced. And, now, 8.5 years later, we have a thriving practice based on the other advisors because people realize, wait a second, a percentage of something beats 100% of nothing. And the folks who are thinking that they're going to survive in this space all on their own are either out of the business or will be soon because there's just too many pieces. There's too many pieces. You can't be all things to all people, and they're starting to realize it. And if not, their broker dealers or the folks they answer to are, because they're starting to realize the liability of running retirement plans and the fact that a good many still are not qualified and should not be doing it. So I think the changes that were taking place and people are starting to realize, hey, let me go to Ari for a question. I don't think Ron is on, but if I have
Yeah, Ron couldn't make it. He was scheduling,
But yeah, so Ron is another good friend of Ari's, and you have an administrative question, go there. Mike does some great stuff with his postings all the time, and it's informational, and that's what a lot of people don't realize, that's the best kind of marketing is give them access to information, and then let them ask the right questions, because then you know what they're capable of and what they're not, and then you can fill in the blanks from there, which helps, again. And we got, when we first started, again, right there on my website, if you go there, it says we're a registered investment advisory. So when another IAR calls up and says, why would I give you the business? You're going to take all the money. I'm not interested in the money. We don't talk to participants, and we don't want to. I was a benefit broker for way too many years. If I never did another open enrollment meeting, I would be fine. Trust me. Our job is to help from the plan sponsor level and let the advisors, work the relationships, which is what they're good at, because they're not good at being risk experts, because they're simply not. Their focus is helping folks from a planning or an investment perspective on an individual basis, and that's what they should focus on.
One thing that in the business that, going back to when I was even at Meyer Swazi, which is now I named the law firm. It's 10 years later. I think the statute of limitations, if you want to, are over. So now I could say who they are. When I was there, I would do networking, like small business networking, and you'd always run into the broker who works out of his home office. He's got a broker dealer, and maybe he's got one or two plans on the books. Do you see those type of advisors anymore? Because I think that and here's the joke. I used to call them Barney Fife advisors. And the reason why I called them Barney Fife advisors is, if you ever watch the Andy Griffith Show, Barney had one bullet in his pocket. So that's my joke. It's one broker. He's got one plan.
Yeah. Well, the nickname, I guess, used to be the two-plan Tony. The people who fell into they had the relationship, and do they exist? They do, to a degree, not as much as they used to. And so we were speaking with one of the larger independent broker dealers about the need for them to outsource the fiduciary responsibilities, because not only did they not know how many plans they had, they didn't know who was running them, they didn't know what providers they were with. And so the chief compliance officer got on and was given a little pushback. And I said, okay, how many advisors do you have? We have 6,000. Okay. How many retirement plans do you work with? Roughly 11,000. Okay. So you're the home of all of the two-plan Tonys. Okay. All of your people have two retirement plans, and you don't have any idea who the rec keeper is. You don't know who the TPA is. You don't know what their compensation is. And at the end of the day, the pushback comes to there. To give you a separate story, we were sitting down with a different BD, and again, much smaller, had about 400 odd advisors. And the CEO was there, and I said, do you have any idea? And he was like, no. And he's like, but if things go south, I'll just throw the broker under the bus. This was the response that we got. And I said, you understand, on the Schedule C and the check, it doesn't come to Joe the broker, it comes to the broker dealer. And the government doesn't care that you gave away 95% because you took 100. Okay. So if you can't explain the process in terms of what went on, and then all of a sudden, he sat up and he needed to know how many plans he had and what they were doing. And so I don't think it's nearly as prevalent as it used to be, thankfully. But again, I don't think it's, it certainly hasn't changed as quickly as it needs to be. But I think the shift is there. And I think a lot of it recently is almost a self-admission. Like, you see people getting out of the business because they realized, wait a second, with the fee compression, they're not making the compensation they used to. So is the juice worth the squeeze? And a lot of them are realizing, hey, maybe it's not. Or outsource it, take a smaller piece, and this way you're protected.
The new thing, I think, is all the rage. Well, it's going to be all the rage starting January 1st, 2021, or PEPs. We've been through this. We've been down this road before. It was called MEPs. It was open MEPs. What's your take on the greatest thing since sliced bread,
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
I never understood that expression. And George Carlin always had this act like, it's a bread, you slice it. What's the big deal? Like, why is that the greatest thing? But
Yeah.
PEPs are the greatest things in sliced bread. What are your opinions about that?
Again, I don't. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not opposed to it by any means, but the idea that like all of a sudden there's some elixir that's going to cure all of these things is silly. I mean, I don't care how you slice it. Well, it's cost efficiencies. Well, that argument ended, probably 3 years ago. You can get any individual plan. I don't care if you have 2 participants or 20,000. You can get the pricing that you need to run the plan efficiently if you ask. Okay. Investments, same thing. I don't care if you have $100 million or nothing. If you ask for a waiver nowadays, you're going to get it. You can have any share class you want. You have to be involved. And one of the problems you run into, and the reason they will be successful, is the biggest problem, again, in my opinion, is plan sponsor apathy. It's a very complex situation. They don't understand it. They don't want to understand it. They believe they've hired someone who understands it or is an expert. In some cases, yes, some cases not. But if you said, oh, by the way, you can outsource everything, including the fiduciary liability, and it's going to cost you X, and do it all in one place, then, that's going to be appealing to a lot of people. So it's not like it's a bad thing, but all of those things you can get on an individual plan basis if you put in the time and hire the right people. So there's a fit for it. There's certainly a fit for it. I have no issues, but is it gonna, all of a sudden, like every individual plan is all of a sudden gonna join a MEP or a PEP or a MIAP or whatever they're calling all the different ones? No.
We've been through, the thing is that we've been through this road before. It was called open maps. Yeah. The problem that I have, and I talked to one of the larger plan providers yesterday to talk about me maybe serving as a pooled plan provider, which I'm going to start offering to people. Everybody wants their own PEP. Every advisory firm wants their own private label, white label MEP, PEP. And the problems that we had with MEPs, we're still going to have with PEPs, which means it all sounds good on paper. To get people to sign up, it just doesn't work out. And you were part of the MEP that I had, before the advisory opinion. Thank you, Tag, that put the kibosh on open MEPs, and it never grew to the level it needed to pay for the audit and to make it economical. And the problem that I have is, again, everybody's going to start one. So here's my story, and I've told the story repeatedly. I had a friend of mine in school. He was a grade younger than me. I think I was in the 2nd grade. He was in the 1st grade. His parents had Ralph Avenue, Ralph Avenue in Brooklyn. They had a greeting card store. And this is the late 70s, and they started to rent videotapes. So all of a sudden, on one side of the wall were videotapes, and they still sold cards. By 1985, there were no more cards. It was called Party Center Video. There were no more party stuff. There was no more invitations. It was nothing. They sold baseball cards, gum, and video. They made a ton of money on video rentals. When my parents bought their first VCR from them, it was $700, and they were kind enough to throw in a free lifetime membership back when they used to charge for lifetime memberships. Everybody went in after they did, and then Blockbuster came out and buried everybody. So my analogy is everybody's going to go into PEPs, and 90% of them are going to fail within 2 to 3 years, just because the economies of scale that you think you're going to get in a larger plan, if you don't achieve the assets that you want, you're going to have to pay for the audit. And now your audit fee is going to be like $100 a head for the participants to pay. And it's going to be 2 to 3 times more than it would have been if they were on a single employer plan.
Yeah. Michael just posted in the chat, right? 87% of them never get above 1,000 people or something.
Where did he come up with these numbers? I love these numbers because these numbers prove what I've always said. I don't know.
Exactly.
You taking polls, Mike? I mean, that. Yeah, 87% stay on the 87%. So listen, I said 10%. I'm a little bit off, but if it's the price is right, I'm still under. Yeah. But Morningstar,
No, and again, so yeah, and there'll be some that are, you see, there are some that have been at it a long time that will be successful because they have the relationships. But again, you're also asking, you're telling the employer, okay, here's a way to unload it, but then guess what? You're not an individual anymore. And you go into a small, mid-sized business owner, what is their whole identity? The business that they built. And now they find out, wait a second, I'm just another throw in somewhere. A lot of people like to have their own plan because it's their plan. It's for their employees. So whether there's if you want to call it sentimental, emotional, whatever, attachment to it, a lot of people don't want to be included with everybody else. They want to do their own thing, and that's why they like their own plan. So again, there'll be takers, but do I think somehow, this is gonna, totally disrupt it? No. Yeah.
No, I think it's an opportunity for successful MEPs to make the transition, and those are going to be the most successful MEPs that already want to branch out to being closed.
Yes. Yeah. Like Terry Powers down in Florida is going to be successful because the guy does tremendous service. He has, a long track record.
Yeah, he's been doing it for 25 years.
They're going to be great. But, and I think he brought up yesterday, I didn't get the whole thing, but I did see something on Twitter where now, the advisor can't be the, whatever they're calling,
full plan provider.
You can't be the PE, whatever acronym they threw on it.
So. No, because you still have these prohibited transaction rules to the hurdles are still going to be there. So, I mean, it's again, I think it's going to be a niche market. You're going to, I was just on a call before this with George Chafe, your buddy at AccuRecord, and somebody somebody else made the analogy. It's like the gold rush. People are going to run in, and very few people are going to find gold.
Yes. Yep. And how long has George been at it? His dad started that firm how many years ago? Right? So
40 years ago?
Yeah, about to say 40 years the guy's been in record keeping. I think he might know a thing or two about trends and how this business works, considering how the margins were never, how thin were the margins when record keepers started, now they're even thinner. So, again, there'll be a place for it, but it's not going to be the end all be all. No.
You're one of the big followers on litigation, more so than I am, because I'm not a litigator. And what are some of the trends that you've been seeing of late? Besides, I think the biggest trend I see is they haven't gone through all the proprietary mutual funds for having their own proprietary mutual funds and their own 401k plan. I think we just saw something this week with John Hancock, which means the judge denied the motion to throw out the case. So usually my wife, the litigator, will tell me that that's usually the time when there's going to be a settlement because they can avoid.
Yeah, that is the key. So again, full disclosure, we are not attorneys here. We do a lot of subject matter expert work for both plaintiffs and defendants. We've actually patented a program called the Plan Analyzer. It's an investment evaluation tool. So now we have the only patented investment evaluation tool in the qualified plan space. One of the issues litigators ran into was they couldn't quantify the potential damage. Now they can, down to the penny, and it's all data driven, so there's no subjectivity. But as far as trends go, certainly going to move down market. The plaintiff's bar is some pretty smart people. The bigger sandbox, if you haven't been sued, you watched your big friend get sued, so you fixed your plan. So the choices amongst the larger plans have certainly gone down. The smaller, mid-sized, not that they're going to McDonaldize the litigation aspect, but ERISA is very complex, and a lot of small to mid-sized plans do not have in-house ERISA counsel. They don't have litigation budgets. They have brokers selling canned products that they haven't changed in 15 years that are not putting the interest of the participant forward. Yeah, Ari brought up the Hancock case. One of the biggest aspects there is standing in terms of who actually who actually can sue on behalf of the class. And the judge threw out the Plummer ruling and basically said, yeah, the argument used to be, well, if you don't have someone who owns all of the funds, then you can't sue on behalf of the class. And that argument will, through the Plummer ruling, will go away, and the Spano versus Boeing is going to get challenged relatively soon, and it's going to have the same result where it's going to open up. People see, I mean, people watched Jerome Schlechter do this, and now they're a little Schlechterites, as we like to call them.
We're not as good as Schlechter.
Well, they don't have to be. A lot of them are finding the cases and then calling him. So
yeah,
now
but a lot of cases they're losing on summary judgment because just saying that the plan's expensive isn't
not the fee. Yeah, the fee issue. And again, with all due respect, he's been great and he's changed a lot of it. And obviously, the Tibble versus Edison was probably the biggest decision we'll see for forever. But the fee issue is lunch money compared to the damages you're going to see from a poor selection, no prudent process from a monitoring perspective for the investments themselves. That's what's going to get people if the small or mid-size, they don't have any documentation. They don't have any prudent process. They got sold a product by a broker who wasn't qualified to do it in the first place. And they're going to say, wait, I listened to this person and they're next. If I was the chief compliance officer of an independent broker-dealer that had any substantial qualified plan business, I would be very nervous. Because
there's discussion here in the meeting here. Julie brought it up. There's a case dealing with a trustee-directed retirement plan. If you look at the 401k site, I think I wrote an article about it. It's a class action lawsuit. And I remember writing the article, I compared it to Spinal Tap. There's a fine line between being clever and stupid. That was the line I used because this was a trustee-directed plan that all of a sudden somebody had, so it was an annual val, and somebody was due a distribution, I think on 12/31/2019, and the employer was ignoring the requests to cash out. And then all of a sudden there was this little thing called COVID, and they were afraid there was going to be a run on the expression, the run on the bank. Anybody who knows the history of the Great Depression knows that phrase. And they created a special valuation date that was going to undercut what these participants would have gotten had they gotten the 12/31/2019 balance. And I believe that's what the case is about. So, when you're creating special valuation windows on a pooled plan, like a trustee directed plan,
Sure.
This is, like I said, you're asking for it. It's like, if you want to fight, if you're looking for a fight, you're going to get it. And this is one of those stupid cases that, they should have thought that, somebody's getting I think it was $30,000 or $40,000 less they're going to get in distribution. If you look at the case, a lot of the other places were, I forget the name of it. I don't know if it was, I don't think it was an engineering firm, but it was a really dumb case. And again, remember what Elmer tells us, no small or medium-sized plans will get sued.
Yeah, and because again, and we've had conversations with large ERISA litigation firms, and they're like, we can't make it work because they're doing it on contingency, so they're investing a lot of time in the effort of suing. You see the Boeings and all the other ones you hear about.
Yeah, Julie's post. Yeah, employer denied a special valuation first request. That's right, and then year before the COVID denied it, and I think they terminated sometime in 18 or 19. They wanted it out, and they said, no, you have to wait till 12/31/19. And then I believe the owner of the company ignored them. And then all of a sudden said, oh, I'm going to create a special valuation date for 3/31, right before the market, of course, went back up. And again, it's a fine line between being clever and stupid.
And that's the thing. If you do some research, and you see some of these large defense firms, their motions to dismiss, the percentages of getting cases dismissed is very low. And as soon as you get, we've joked about it. We've joked about it for years. How many times have you read the article? Well, the trial was supposed to start Monday at 9 o'clock.
On the eve of the
4:30
trial,
on
it's a
Friday.
$12 million settlement. Whoa, how?
We've reached a settlement. You want to know why? Because it's really expensive, okay, to defend, and 70% of the time you lose. So why is it? Why would so Novant Healthcare is the big firm here in North Carolina.
Fidelity was it AB was it ABG? What was it that case?
ABV.
Yeah.
Yep.
Didn't they take that one to trial, and that's where they got
Yes.
clobbered for like 20-something million bucks? Yeah.
So the Boeing case, and don't quote me exactly, but I believe it went on for 9.5 years. They spent $11-12 million in defense, and then they wrote a settlement check for like 14.7. So yeah, you know, it's, and what 200-person group that has $50 million in their plan has a defense budget. If you check with Travelers, who's the largest writer, I believe still the largest writer of fiduciary liability insurance, their favorite because they never pay out because everyone lies on the application unknowingly, which is the conversation for another day. But the average cost of defense, and this was a few years ago, was, I believe, I'm going to say for just the basics, was close to 400,000. Average settlement was like $1 million. So you had $1.4 million in a defense budget, and literally 70% of the time the plaintiff won. So you know what kind of odds are that if you're a plan sponsor? And I was mentioning in the Novant case, they settled, it was like $32 million. We had done a CE class here and for a not-for-profit, and one of the ladies who worked at Novant had retired, and she was on the board of the not-for-profit, as we were explaining to the folks the importance of outsourcing their fiduciary liability. And the woman stood up and basically gave us a testimonial. She's like, listen, I was at Novant, got sued. I was on the retirement plan committee. This is what happened. This is why you need to do this. And they did the math. And it was cheaper to write a check for $30 million than it was to try and, because they were dead to rights. The broker was tight with the CFO. The compensation went from $600,000 to $6.5 million for the advisor because Novant was buying hospitals and practices all over. So the plan was just growing. Well, he didn't have anything to do with that. There was no value that advisor brought to earn that money. It was because the assets were growing because they were buying up practices and hospitals, and they weren't keeping track of what was reasonable. And one of the doctors who got dismissed called them out on it. So they put $3 million back in the plan, which only now furthered her cause to prove, hey, wait a second, something clearly is not, all I did was complain and you gave it $3 million. What happens if I dig? And sure enough, they did, and it cost them another $30 million. And I understand the pushback because, again, Ari mentioned the fear mongering and the scare tactics, and I get all that. But at the end of the day, again, trying to do the right thing by the participant because the plan is not being run properly, and that's where they got to turn around. And you know, yes, the lawyers make a lot of money, but the lawyers also spend a lot of time in putting that process together. So
when a case, you know, the question was, why do in federal practice, it's kind of like it reminds me of a hostage negotiation. The first thing they do, standard operating procedure, is they turn off the heat and electricity. In a federal litigation, there's always going to be the motion to dismiss by the defendants to get out, and the accusation is that based on the pleadings, no matter how we look to the benefit of the plaintiff, there's no case here. And that's the way to get out cheap. And if you lose that motion, that's when you're going to settle, because that means the case is going to go to trial. You don't want to take a risk and increase your costs and take it to a jury. And that's why you see
a judge. A lot of the judges don't want to see it because, again, you go through the discovery and everything else. And so, yes, as long as you can plausible. You have to make the claim has to be plausible. And there's been some bad ones like that Trader Joe's pleading was terrible. You have to write a solid pleading for it to make sense because
and that's went back to explanation. Just because they're expensive doesn't mean they breach their fiduciary duty. You have to show, and that's what happens when you don't have Jerry Schlichter defending you. You have some guy who all of a sudden
There's no an expert.
I saw it on Facebook. Somebody said, the vanilla ice cream you're eating may not have vanilla in it. I think maybe he's going to be going into ERISA and starting those type of lawsuits. But I think we see a lot of ERISA litigators bringing these cases who are novices when it comes to ERISA litigation, and that's why these cases.
And they should be thrown out, and the frivolous one should be, because it's a waste of everybody's time. I'm not sure where Julie is from, but I'm definitely going to side with Greg here in this battle. A lifelong.
Julie's with the Pension Studio. She's based in Rhode Island.
I'm about to say she must be a Sox fan, because I saw a little back and forth. Yes, so I'm gonna side with Greg here. Greg, I'm a lifelong Met fan, so
most of us here are Mets fans, and that was a tough loss last night. And I think Howie Rose said on Twitter, if there were fans in the game, then Workman would have flopped. I don't know.
But there's cardboard cutouts, Ari. What do you mean there are no fans?
Did you see the cardboard cutouts? Chipper Jones got one with his son.
Yes.
Ryan Seacrest has one, and it was next to Kelly Ripa.
Yeah.
And it was that whole dog section, which now is populated by more dogs than people.
More than people, I think. Yes.
No, but I thought about getting one, but I was like, I should get one for my son. But when I saw the Mets were charging $85 or $86, and the Phillies were charging $40, I'm like.
I didn't mean to digress there. I did see the back and forth.
Yeah, the Behan. Julie brought it up, was the Behan brothers case. It's an interesting case. Like I said, there's no reason why you're asking for trouble when you created the special valuation date.
Yes. Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
I think they should have waited it out, especially when the market came back rallying after March the 31st. But, there's a fine line between being clever and stupid. Yeah. And speaking of, I wouldn't say stupid, but the Shell case, and I brought it up last time I was on here with Mike 2 weeks ago. Participant data, is that a plan asset? Well, litigation.
I guess we're going to find out, right? Soon. Mike is shaking his head no, and yeah, so I will, we have not delved to most of the cases we get involved in are imprudent investments and monitoring and stuff. We haven't really dove into the data aspect of it. Yes, but I will defer to Mike on that one, and he seemed pretty adamant that it was. But again, that's the whole idea is what he's going to stretch it. He's going to stretch it. He's going to stretch it until they tell him, okay, now you have to go back. Throw everything against the wall, see what sticks, and then. You take your lumps where there's a little pushback, because you'll see,
Yeah.
It takes one of the claims to get it past the motion to dismiss.
Yeah, you just need one judge to say this is going to pass muster. You have a cause of action. And
that's another thing that people don't realize is the system is set up to where the judge is really important in these things. People don't you get someone who is pretty well versed in federal law, trust law, which a lot of federal judges are. Again, if it's plausible, it's they have to let it go. They have to defer to the plaintiff, not to the defense. So they're going to give them a chance to at least have that argument. And a lot of them don't want to get to discovery because, they're going to find out that they don't have the information necessary to make all these decisions that they have been making.
Yeah, it's a definition of what is an asset.
Yeah.
You can make the argument that participant information has got to be protected and therefore it is an asset. And then you could make the other argument, if it was an asset, I can't deposit it in my custodial account.
So yes, so I'll defer to the lawyers fighting on that one, but I think again I think that's stretching the outer bounds of it. Yes.
Yeah, if they do win the case, the plaintiffs, it's going to dash the hopes and dreams of every other retirement plan provider who ever wanted to cross-sell and never could.
Yes. Or hopefully it brings to light what they're doing with it and then makes them adjust, how they're sharing it. So.
Let's go back to the proprietary lawsuits. To me, that was easy bank. It's like easy money, because I find that with John Hancock or Fidelity or whoever's the defendant of the week in these cases, I call it the price of doing business. If you're Fidelity and your plan is full of Vanguard funds, how does that look? You know, I compare it to the restaurant where they order takeout, where the workers and the cooks and whatever order takeout. How does this look? And Fidelity doesn't mind writing a check for 20-something million dollars or whatever it was, because that's the way of doing business. I'd rather take that hit and write the check out than having to explain to everybody why I don't have Fidelity funds in my Fidelity 401k plan.
It is a tough spot for him. It is a tough spot for him again, yeah, in terms of how they're structuring it. But again, just because it doesn't mean just because it's proprietary that it's bad either. Again, it's all facts and circumstances and how they're looking at it from a processing perspective. So you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because, again, there's one issue amongst the plan itself. So it's a fine line in terms of how they have to walk there. So, and also how they're putting the pleading together, how they're making the argument is also going to be important as well. So
last question: what's the scariest disaster of a plan that was brought to you that you had to fix?
Oh,
because I love those stories. Mike knows I love disaster movies, so I like disaster plans, like stories about those.
Then this is an easy one. So we had a doctor group. We had an interested attorney who approached us and said, listen, I think there's a problem with this plan. We might need some help. It was started out as profit sharing, and it was pooled and trustee directed. And the doctors decided to buy some limited partnerships on some real estate because, of course, that always goes up and never goes down. And
yeah.
They're gonna build all these great things, and there's gonna be a Walmart, and there's gonna be all this stuff, and yep. And lo and behold, 2008 comes around, and now it's worth like -6 cents on the dollar, and they're all upset. And I'm like, hello, you voted to put it in, so you can't hold anybody responsible. But they're like, all right, well, how do we get it out? So we literally had to go through the process of finding someone to buy the MLPs, and they took a bath. But and we looked at them and we're like, well, you understand the importance of liquidity, right? Of the investments in the retirement plan. Like if somebody wants to get their money out tomorrow, you have to be able to have the money. And if you own a big room, you might not be able to sell it in an hour and, get it. So then we figured, okay, we're going through that process, and we get it done. Again, they took a bath, and as we're reviewing the rest of the plan, it turns out that not only did they find the MLPs important, they had bought a apartment complex in the Ukraine.
Oh boy. Is it the good side of Ukraine or the side that Russia has?
And this was before. And so Julie, that's pretty much was our reaction. Yeah, that was pretty much our reaction.
But is everybody's horror story? Is everybody's horror story involve a medical practice? Because my horror story with the guys who put all their DB assets in Bernie Madoff, that was a doctor's group.
Well, because but yeah, so then that was a very quick conversation. We're like, this is going to happen in the next 3 hours, or we're getting up and leaving. And again, thankfully, we're able to extract that as well. And the plan is, thankfully, on the right path. But one of the things, and I bet Mike probably has a million in terms of some of the stuff he's seen from a plan perspective. But I think it's also, hopefully what keeps us all in business, right? If everyone did everything right, then there wouldn't be a need for half the people on this call. So not that we want to wish ill on people, but the fact that people are starting, and I think a lot more folks are starting to realize, hey, wait a second, I don't know what I'm doing, so I need to hire an Ari and a Mike and a Julie and a James and a Greg and whoever else. That I think
medical practices I think have the worst plans. To me, it's medical practice 1, attorneys 2, and the reason is they're too busy on their practice. So they don't care about HR. They don't know what HR is. You know, they treat their employees poorly. They're so overworked, and they have no time to deal with that. And in my situation, the funny thing with the Madoff case was the guy, the accountant said, oh, because Bernie keeps on trading a lot and has capital gains, you should put it in a tax deferred account. And that's why they came up with the idea to put all their money in the playing with Bernie.
Julie,
And the accountant lost his job.
Julie hit the nail on the head again, and they're also smarter than everybody too. So it's, you know, it's like you said, almost to the point where, you know, they don't want to admit, hey, wait a second, you know, one last funny one. So doctor group with 9 partners, 8 of them are 55 years old, and one of them is 34. And the 34-year-old is day trading his 401k plan, and the other 8 partners are begging him to stop, and they finally bring us in, and he went from 1.2 million to about $275,000 in about 2 weeks, literally. And then realized, hey, wait a second, you know, maybe I should just go back to being a doctor. I'm not, you know, the next, yeah, you know, maybe watch too much Boiler Room or Wall Street or I don't know what. But yeah, so it's a lot of it has to do with the ego. A lot of them are like, wait a second, you know, I'm smarter, so, you know, if I can do surgery, I must know everything about investments. So,
Yeah, so I think we'll conclude this week. And of course, I have to shill for my stuff. That 401k, we'll do this again in 2 weeks. We'll figure out on a guest or whatever. And then in 2 weeks from tomorrow, we're going to do that 401k virtual conference 5. It's a 2-hour event. And then, of course, January, we're going to do that national conference. We're not going to travel this time. Right on the eve of a pandemic. We're going to do it virtually. James is going to be part of that.
yes.
That 401k National Virtual Conference, we call it. A few of you already signed up, $20.21 to sign up as an early bird. I saw somebody else is running a virtual conference. I won't say who, but they're charging $1,300 for a virtual conference. Well, that's the top thing. So my top one is like 140, because Mike has to be the one guy who's going to pay for that. Because Mike wants a t-shirt. But somebody's charging $1,300, and I jokingly said with George, because I was mentioning my conference, and you know, I'm not ashamed to try to sell sponsorships. I said, for $1,300, and that's like the top one. The cheaper ones, $340 is the cheapest one. For $1,300. You better DoorDash me a steak from Peter Luger.
Okay. I was about to say, it better be good. Yeah, it better be good. So,
I want Peter Luger, because my joke is $20.21. I ain't giving you food. You know, I'm sorry, I can't arrange it. You know, we can't do that. You'll have to go out on your own. So, James, I thank you so much.
thank you very much. I appreciate the time this afternoon.
No, I appreciate your time, because it's going to be fun. You know, we'll share this on YouTube and all that stuff. And, you know, yes, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets. Exactly. Great.
Got to watch tonight. And then it's going to be a problem for me, because it's the same time. I think my Clippers are playing the Lakers. So I got to switch channels. So yeah, let's go Mets. And in Julie's case, let's go Sox. And for the Yankee fans, let's go Yankees, except when they play the Mets. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Take care.